Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. I am Megan, also known as Going Green Mom, and this is our second August gardening haul. This is our second August Azure Standard haul, and I got 5 pounds of roasted pistachios. Those are awesome, by the way. We are using about 5 pounds every 2 months. I got some charcoal to replenish supply because I sent my other bottle over to the kids' dads with one of them. I got 3 cans of refried beans. We've just already broken into them. 3 cans of French style green beans. I haven't tried those before. So one thing you might want to think about, you can typically get 1, 3, or 12 can amounts. I always try and get a smaller amount when I'm trying something new, but at the same time, we need 3 cans of green beans for a green bean casserole, so I might as well get 3. As you go up, obviously the prices get better. I got Lick the Sugar habit. That is one thing I am kind of trying to work on, is getting sugar under control in my life. I got some toothpaste that for whatever reason seems to have been chopped off in this video. Sorry. I also got some, if you care, baking cups. That's like a parchment muffin tin cup thing to line. And 4 ounces of ground thyme. I typically use that in a breakfast sausage recipe that I use with ground beef. Now for the review on this month's Azure Standard episode, I would like to talk to you about a book that I bought and was actually planning on doing a full video on, and I can't get there. So the book is the Living Soil Handbook. It's a no-till gardening book about market gardens, and I've got mixed feelings about it, and I've got mixed feelings on recommending it as well. So just so we're on the same page, I will go ahead and link the channel, No Till Growers, which is the channel of the author, as well as the Amazon link for the book in the description box down below. And then I will try to explain how I feel about this book. The book is split into 3 sections. The first is disturb as little as possible. The second is keep it covered as much as possible. And the third is keep it planted as much as possible. And that is really the high-level overview of what the book is basically telling you to do with your ground that you want to make better. It is broken down into chapters beyond that. Some of them are more helpful than others, but I should just start out right from the gate, mention that I am not the target audience for this book, and that probably plays into my review a bit. So this book is for market gardening specifically, and the author basically talks about different techniques that they have used or that they have heard of others using, and also talks to other farms to share their experience. He was a conventional market gardener before he started doing no-till, and I believe he was also going conventional to organic at the same time. A lot of what you find in the book, past the point of basic understanding of what the soil microbiome is and how it is helped or hindered by the things that we do in conventional gardening or in non-conventional gardening. And Little Bit found something to play with, so I'm sorry if you hear her in the background. In this book, the first part of it talks about the soil microbiome and that kind of stuff. And then he talks about selecting a space for your garden. And we're to the point of if you're going to buy acreage or something to put your market garden on. And I guess that should have been my first clue. I'm not going to go buy a farm to plant a garden. Sometimes I feel ridiculous spending $50 on stuff a year to plant a garden, even though I do need that compost and and nutrients to benefit the soil. So I'm not going to go buy a farm to plant a market garden. I'm not going to dig up my entire lot and put it into high tunnels or row crop gardening type situation, or even like just a large rectangular plot of stuff in any way, shape, or form. I live in a trailer park on 1/10 of an acre, and I plant in what is essentially flower beds. That is where I'm at. I am happy with that. My goal is not to sell produce at the farmer's market. My goal is to help supplement my family with organically grown produce, and I'm happy with that. Getting into the second section, he basically goes through different ways of doing the same thing and talks about different materials you can use to do them with. There's like chapters on compost and mulch, and then I don't remember off the top of my head what the other 2 chapters were. They're basically chapters that are, in a sense, giving you a choose your own story. You can pick from these different techniques, you can pick from these tools, you can pick from these materials to use with these other combinations of things. Now, a lot of that is going to be determined by your area and what's available, or what you want to pay to have hauled in. So some things are going to be more readily accessible in certain areas of the country, other things not so much. And that's typically, I think, what most people sort of gauge their choices on. So is that relevant for a market gardener? When you are buying things by the truckload, I suppose it is. I think to some degree it's common sense that you're going to use what you have readily available in the area. As far as like techniques and things, this is where I really struggle with the author to some degree, because the book in a lot of ways reads that these are techniques that you can use in a no-till situation. But even to the point of just straight up saying, till the space, that's still tilling. Even if you're tilling in organic material, it's still tilling. And he has videos on his channel talking about how it's just dogma and this and that. It's like, but if you're going to call yourself a no-till grower, in my mind, you shouldn't be tilling. And I don't think you really need to till. I think there are ways to do it a majority of the time without that. And I'm not going to say that there's never a time you shouldn't. Like, I've got uncles that put a garden in on top of what used to be a driveway. Yeah, they tilled for the first couple of years. They still till because they're not no-till growers. In that situation, the author would recommend doing something that's very similar to tilling. And I'm struggling with the idea of giving them a book to read. And my concern is they're going to see these things as options, and they're going to go buy some expensive gadget that does essentially the same thing as a tiller without flipping the soil over. And in my mind, you're still disturbing a lot by doing that. If the goal is to not disturb the soil, first and foremost, it doesn't make any sense. I do have reservations recommending this book. I think if you do get this book, you need to understand that it's not necessarily applicable to the home gardener. And I think in a lot of ways, there are other books that would make more sense if you are wanting to be a more efficient gardener, that are more applicable to the home gardener in addition to the market gardener. One of the forewords in this book is by Ben Hartman, who is the author of The Lean Farm. I have met him. I have not seen the farm he is on now, but I had actually done a tour of the farm he started out on. And he goes in depth on how to put the lean principles to work in a market garden type setting. And that was kind of, I think my expectation of this book was sort of like how to efficiently make your soil better. And I figured I could just scale that down. But like a lot of the techniques and things suggested are really more thing, like they take special equipment or they take lots of time and lots of equipment and lots of manpower to do. And that's not really what I'm going for. I'm not going to buy tractors and roller thingies to crimp cover crops. A cover crop doesn't make sense in my situation because most of the cover crops they're suggesting are things that are either already growing in my yard or they're types of grasses that I would get in trouble for growing just as grasses. I guess my point is, I don't know that the information in this book is scalable to a home gardener. If you are a market gardener or you want to be a market gardener and you want some tips on how to design your beds and stuff in such a way that it's efficient, it might be helpful, especially if you don't have a good understanding of no-till or no-dig gardening. But I think you need to realize that a lot of this book basically, in my opinion, covers some techniques that should be an intermediary timetable between when you're a conventional grower transitioning to no-till or when you're putting in a bed and dealing with perennial weeds. So overall, is there good information? Yes. Is it worth the price of the book? Probably not. And I'm sorry. I had high hopes for the book. I was really looking forward to it. And I really, even with my limited knowledge of the soil microbiome and how it works and how to make it better, the applicable points I was doing out of common sense for the last decade trying to make my soil better on its own. Watching Charles Dowding on YouTube is probably closer to the information I would need, which I do watch Charles Dowding. Our climates are a bit different, and so that's not quite where I want to be either, but I think it really gets more to the heart of putting in less work with the system by doing a little bit more work up front and really fostering a good relationship with the soil and helping to heal the soil from previous issues. And what it really gets down to is a little bit at a time, doing a little bit every year. It really adds up over time. And there's not going to be a magic bullet that makes your soil better by replacing processes and changing. Obviously, you need to get off the chemicals and you need to put the sort of the infrastructure in place, whether you choose to put a silage tarp down or sheet mulch with cardboard and compost on top. Once you do those things and you spend a little bit of time, pulling the weeds out of the mulch the first year or two. You guys, I started mulching last year, and the amount of difference in weed pressure has been huge. And yeah, I pulled weeds as much as I could when I started, but I didn't wait a year to put mulch down. I've done that. If I don't put mulch down, Mother Earth is going to cover herself with more weeds. So I don't think you just have to deal with it for a year is good advice. So anyway, I'm going to quit rambling. I don't have other books on this particular topic that I can recommend. I've got a couple of Charles Dowding's books wish listed. The Lean Farm, I can tell you, uses many of the same techniques as this author does. If you want me to do a review of the Lean Farm, I can do that. I'm not fully on board with the things that he chooses to do either. And part of that is why I'm no longer in their CSA. I'm not sure they still have a CSA, but I choose not to do that anymore either because I'm not fully on board with the way they do things. But that book does talk a lot about ways to be efficient and do things in an efficient manner. Overall, we don't want to be a slave to the garden when we want to find the garden enjoyable. Is it hard work? Yes, it will always be hard work, but it can be fun work. It can be healthy work. A little bit at a time really adds up over a lifetime, whether it's in your house or in the garden.